France's presidential fight is heating up. Incumbent President Emmanuel Macron will go head-to-head with Marine Le Pen on the 24th of April in their bid to woo voters for the second round of the election. Both Macron and Marine Le Pen have sharpened their on-ground campaign as well as attacks on each other's poll promises. After northern France, Macron held a rally in eastern city of Strasbourg. Macron is struggling to convince the working-class voters to vote for him in the runoff and not far-right candidate Le Pen. Macron is eagerly explaining his policies while in the field and trying to convince people to hand him a second term. Despite leading in the first round of vote, Macron is facing a tougher than expected fight for re-election. There are big regional divergences. Election battle lines are drawn along local economic, social and demographic contours. But he is not shying away from angry voters. He is instead engaging in confrontational debates. Macron defended himself against hecklers during a campaign speech in Strasbourg. Macron's planned pension reform is at the core of his program for re-election. Several residents assailed the centrist of pensions after he indicated that the retirement age might be pushed back from 62 to only 64 instead of 65. Now, Macron defended his sudden softening of pension reforms he has pushed for years. Macron also stated that far-right leader Marine Le Pen would lead France to war if elected by leaving the European Union.
Mais je vous dis aujourd'hui, le choix que vous aurez le 24 avril, c'est le choix entre l'extrême droite et votre serviteur. Et aujourd'hui, mais si le 24 avril, vous choisissez l'extrême droite, non, j'ai compris que vous me défendiez, mais c'était pour deux. Mais ce que je veux dire, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, l'extrême droite française est l'allié du parti qui est au pouvoir en Hongrie. Et donc, ce qu'elle veut faire, c'est ce qu'on voit en Hongrie.
On the other hand, far-right candidate Marine Le Pen said Macron's offer to soften planned pension reforms is to delude voters as she is closing the gap with Macron ahead of the second round. Le Pen has focused her attacks on Macron on his plans to raise the retirement age. She has promised social justice campaign that would leave the retirement age at 62 and even lower it to 60 for people who began working before the age of 20. She has also launched a series of governmental reforms which she says she would pursue if she is elected. Le Pen proposed a constitutional change as well to make way for widespread use of referendums. She also said that she wants to return the presidential term to 7 years from its current 5 years.
Mais je ne verrai rien de scandaleux, bien au contraire, à ce que la réforme des retraites fasse l'objet d'un référendum. Il ne le fera pas si jamais il est élu, je vous le dis. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il n'a pas usé d'une seule fois du référendum durant 5 ans, parce qu'il y est fondamentalement opposé, parce qu'Emmanuel Macron a peur du peuple. Voilà. Et il préfère largement les techniciens de quelques cabinets, que ce soit par ailleurs. Donc tout cela, je pense que c'est un artifice électoral. C'est un somnifère à destination des électeurs de gauche à qui il cherche à faire prendre des vessies pour des lanternes.
And for more updates on this, our correspondent Rosie Burchett is joining us live from Brussels. Rosie, thank you for joining us. The campaign brawl is heating up. Now, Macron says that Le Pen would push France out of the EU, and questions have been raised about the NATO membership as well. What can you tell us about that?
A very nail-biting and nervous couple of weeks here ahead of those elections in France for officials here in Brussels, both NATO and the EU, and that's precisely because France plays a very key role in both of those organisations. The European Union, at the headquarters of the European Commission in that building behind me, France currently holds the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU, so it has an even greater role currently overseeing policy. Now, in terms of the EU globally, France is the only EU member that has a permanent seat at the UN Security Council, and it's the only member that is a nuclear power. So at this really critical time with the war in Ukraine, France's role within the European Union is heightened even still greater on that global stage. Now, when it comes to NATO, Marine Le Pen, that presidential candidate in France, has threatened, if she were elected, to pull France out of NATO's command structure, which would be entirely destabilising for the alliance. So some nervous couple of weeks until those final results come in for officials here in Brussels.
Right. Now, I believe there's a campaign underway in Brussels as well, targeted to French citizens there. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Brussels is a city that plays host to many French citizens, both who are here working, for example, for those institutions, but also because it's only a few hours away across the border, so there are plenty of people from France that have migrated to Belgium. Now, we are expecting some campaigning from Macron's party later in the day here in Brussels. They're expected to be campaigning at a local market frequented as a social spot for many workers here in Brussels after the working day is done. Now, those campaigners are likely not going to have a very tough battle ahead of them when it comes to convincing French citizens here. Most of them, we know, voted for Macron, at least in the first round. French citizens, there are so many of them here in Brussels that they actually have their own polling station at an exhibition centre here in the Belgian capital. They will be heading there again in a couple of weeks' time, so some campaigning ahead. The campaign comes to Brussels today, but as I said, probably not the place in which Macron's party is going to face the toughest battle. That will be, of course, in those more working class parts of the country in France, where they're really trying to get the votes away from Marine Le Pen back toward Emmanuel Macron. And the big question there in France is, where are the votes for left-wing candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who got 1 in 5 of the votes? Remember, where are they going to go? Right. Macron is campaigning fiercely to try and make sure that they go toward him.
Right. All right, Rosie, thank you so much for all your updates on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.